Hey folks, yeah, you. Welcome to the Dark Horse Podcast live stream number. Is it going to be 336?
Yes.
336, see? I'm Dr. Bret Weinstein. You are Dr. Heather Hying. For those who have been sitting on the edge of their seat for news of Toby after his motorcycle accident that we discussed last time, Toby is on the mend, going to be fine. Seems like he does not need surgery on his foot. Still a possibility, but in any case, the boy is nothing if not impressive. Not only is he physically bouncing back at an amazing rate, but he is emotionally as well or better than you could possibly imagine. He's quite a guy.
Yeah. So remarkable, and we are so grateful. And thank you for all of the well wishes that we received across many different avenues. It was hard, of course, and we are just full of gratitude for all that has gone right here.
Yes, it's. I've started thinking of it not as a terrible motorcycle accident, which it was, but as an excellent motorcycle accident because of how well it turned out relative to what might have been. So there it is. It's quite a relief, and definitely puts things into stark. I already said relief. I can't say stark relief. It puts things into, yes, stark perspective.
Yes. And this is what matters, right? Today, we're going to talk about some other things that matter in light of the hearings in the Senate this morning. The, what was it? It's Homeland Security and Government Regulations, I think, is the name of the committee, in which Fauci was, he was supposed to be testifying, I guess, but that's not exactly what happened.
No, oddly not.
Yeah.
Oddly not.
Yeah, so we're going to, after we pay the rent by reading you ads from three of our amazing sponsors here. We're going to start by reminding our audience of some of where we have been, not we personally, but we as a country, in which I'm going to share some excerpts from the COVID era stories that I've been publishing on Natural Selections for much of this year. And then we're going to talk about what happened in the Senate today and some of what we think it means. So that's what's coming today. So without further ado, let's go to the ads.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So our first sponsor this week is Xlear. Xlear is a nasal spray that supports respiratory health. It's widely available online and in stores, and both it and the company that makes it are fantastic. It's Xlear, Xlear, but pronounced clear, even though it's got an X right there at the top and no C. We wash our hands, and that's good. But it's rare to get sick through your hands. Nasal hygiene often gets overlooked, but the majority of bacteria and viruses that make us sick enter through our mouths and noses. Enter Xlear. Xlear is a nasal spray that contains Xylitol, also spelled with an X, a 5-carbon sugar which reduces the stickiness of bacteria and viruses to our tissues. When xylitol is present, bacteria and viruses such as strep, SARS-CoV-2, and RSV don't adhere to our airways as well. This helps our body's natural defense mechanisms easily flush them away. Xlear is a simple nasal spray. Use it morning and evening. It takes just 3 seconds. It's fast, easy, and decidedly healthy. Listen to Nathan Jones, Xlear's founder, talking to Bret on the Inside Rail in 2024. The following year, Lon Jones, osteopath and inventor of Xlear, talked to Bret about how xylitol interacts with respiratory viruses. We recommend those conversations, and we highly recommend Xlear as a daily habit and prophylactic against respiratory illnesses. That's Xlear with an X, Xlear. Get Xlear online or at your pharmacy, grocery store, or natural products retailer. It's available everywhere at this point, as it should be. And start taking 6 seconds each day to improve your nasal hygiene and support your respiratory health.
Awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah, it's clear with an X, which is just such an unclear way of spelling it. It's clear as mud.
Our second sponsor for this episode is Puori. And also a slightly unusual spelling, so I'll just go there first. Puori, Puori. Puori makes a wide array of supplements and powders, from vitamin C and magnesium to creatine and protein powders. Actually, what I've written here is protein powers. They do not make protein powers. They make protein powders, but perhaps Toby, who uses their protein powders, maybe he feels like it gives him some protein powers.
It's
I don't know. I'm not quoting him, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he hasn't said it, which is
He hasn't said it.
Not to
Yeah,
quote him.
I wouldn't misattribute a quote to him. What makes Puori different is how clean and pure all of their products are. All of them. Let's focus on Puori's grass-fed whey protein powder, which was named Best Overall by Vogue US and Cleanest Protein by Wired. Our son Toby, 20 years old, agrees. He's been making protein-enriched smoothies for a few years now, but had a hard time finding a protein powder that he liked. Of Puori's protein powder, he says, "This is the best of all the ones I've tried. It's smooth going down and full of great whey protein." Puori's grass-fed whey protein powder is not just nutritious, it's clean. A significant fraction of protein powders on the market contain lead in amounts that are known to be dangerous. In comparison, Puori consistently meets California Prop 65 standards and is Clean Label Project certified. Puori's protein powder also delivers a whopping 21 grams of whey protein in each serving and is free of GMOs, pesticides, and exogenous hormones. Whether you're looking for magnesium or a multivitamin, collagen, or protein powder, you cannot go wrong with Puori. Use code DARKHORSE at puori.com/darkhorse to get 32% off your first Puori grass-fed whey protein order when you start a subscription. In addition, you get a free premium shaker bottle on your first subscription order. Go to Puori, PUORI.com/darkhorse and use the code DARKHORSE at checkout for this limited offer. Maybe Toby's regular ingestion of Puori's protein powder have helped contribute to his incredibly rapid healing. I don't know, but both things are true.
It's not hurting him, and although his youth also, I remember healing fast, and man, it's incredible to watch. You can almost hear it.
It's true. It's true.
All right. Yeah. Our third sponsor today, Heather, is Marsmen. That's Marsmen spelled with a Q, of course, because all sponsors at Dark Horse have to spell their brand with some letter that shouldn't be there. But actually, it's not spelled with a Q. It's spelled actually more or less as you would imagine, Marsmen. Now, what Marsmen is a testosterone elevator. It contains no testosterone of its own, but it has 5 ingredients that cause your testosterone to go up. So what is this about? Well, as you get older, as a man, your testosterone drops. Some of that is surely the result of normal senescence. Likely, a lot of it is not. The fact is, we are surrounded by estrogenic compounds and other things in our environment that are not natural.
Now, sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
When you say that we
yes.
you meaning men in this case,
yes.
are surrounded by estrogenic compounds, you're not referring to women, are you?
An estrogenic compound, I see it could be a fortification of women. Mm-hmm. That could be an estrogenic compound.
Yeah. But a fortification of women should not be, at least a fortification of good women, should not be sufficient to artificially lower your testosterone. In fact, it might do the opposite.
I would imagine, actually, somebody should run that experiment. Probably they have. But yes, were there a fortification of women, probably testosterone levels will go up. But as these things are not common, you may want to take some other kind of action. Now, if you go to your doctor, you're going to have all kinds of horrifying conversations that may well end in them telling you your testosterone is normal, whatever that means, given that they are establishing what normal is in a world full of estrogenic compounds. So in any case, I actually do take this stuff, and it actually does work. So I suggest you check them out at mengotomars.com, and unfortunately there's no QR code there. Probably you can't see it on the bottle here, but anyway,
do you have a call to action or something?
I cannot find it. So anyway, here's the thing. You can go to their site, mention that you heard about them through us, and hopefully that works. The stuff does. So that's what you really need to know.
Just keep riffing.
I'm riffing. Yes.
Dude,
okay.
I'm sure I can find it.
It contains Tongkat Ali, Shilajit, vitamin D3, and taurine. And it is certified by independent labs, so you know that's what's in it and that it has the appropriate amounts.
I mean, I can read it if you want, but I think I should make it bigger for you to read.
Okay. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it. Tell you what, in an effort to demonstrate how well it works, I'm going to read it with a rugged voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I mean, right?
Okay. That's the call to action part. Yeah. Well, okay.
For a limited time, our listeners get 50% off for life plus free shipping and, all in caps, 3 free gifts at mengotomars.com. That's mengotomars.com for 50% off and 3 free gifts when you check out. And it's also available at Amazon. No, not the forest, the retailer. After your purchase, they will ask you where you heard of them. Please support our show and tell them Dark Horse sent you. All right. Flying by the seat of our pants the way men do. You know what that means?
No, do tell.
Okay, so in the old days, like imagine the early days of aviation, right?
Okay.
You're flying.
Oh, you actually know this story.
Yeah,
You're not
actually-
about to completely bullshit.
No, there's a lot of
Okay.
stuff that, like,
Because men also do that.
balls to the walls. You know what that means?
You've told
Yeah,
me.
you put the throttle all the way forward. The
Yeah.
ball's on the throttle. Right. So, it's a family show. Balls to the walls.
Yeah. Balls or wall? Isn't it balls to the wall? It's balls to the wall.
It may be that I'm remembering there was a ski run at Mammoth when I was a kid called Balls to the Walls that I
And
do
that
not
was about
think.
young men plastering themselves on
Yes,
various...
I do not think that was a reference to aviation. But flying by the seat of your pants.
Okay.
You fly by the seat of your pants when the tug of the airplane, the seat pulling under you as you turn this way, you feel the plane pulling you, that's giving you feedback, and you are flying by the seat of your pants means that you are using this visceral information.
That reminds me of, I think I may have even read it in the past on air, Matthew Crawford's Why We Drive.
Yeah.
Which is, I haven't read the whole book on air, but it's just an extraordinary, I mean, everything he writes is amazing, but he talks specifically about the sort of the red, the analytical, the what does the number say on the speedometer or the screen experience of speed, as opposed to the visceral experience of speed. And he is a motorcyclist and also an avid car guy, but he's mostly talking about motorcycles. And he says, like, it just doesn't compare. Right?
Yeah, in fact, I remember you reading a section to me, and he does say something in there. I apologize, Matthew. I'm going to butcher this. You said it very eloquently, but you said that these older kinds of cars that are not so refined let you know that it is your ass hurtling down the road at 75 miles an hour. Rather than that it's the abstract experience of a modern, fancy car.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, same idea.
Yeah. Flying by the seat of your pants, the visceral experience of speed, and in the case of flying, of moving in all three planes, right? Having both, having tilt and roll and yaw, potentially all at once.
Yikes.
All right. So we both of us watched did not see all of the Fauci hearing this morning, and wanted to talk about it because this, in some ways this feels like a long time coming, and then it's sort of a letdown. But of course, there's no way for a Senate hearing to actually do all of what people would want to have done, regardless. So one of the things I want to do is just like place us back in the time of, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And in part, I've been doing that through natural selections this year. I've read excerpts from, I think, and maybe one or two complete versions of these stories that I've been posting. I solicited stories from people, true stories that I or people we're working with could vet for their factual accuracy, that I've been publishing most weeks since February or March of this year. And the response to them has been extraordinary. And many people have said that it's been cathartic to go back and listen. And the response has been so extraordinary that I still have dozens that I haven't even looked at yet. And I had to shut down new submissions in March because they were coming in so fast. So clearly this has struck a nerve, as it should. And so I went back to just share with you some excerpts. And of course, most of the best stories aren't easily excerpted. So I've got a few excerpts to share, just to put us back in the era that then we see Fauci supposedly testifying about, although he doesn't answer any questions. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I do want to say something. One of the experiences that I think all of us are having, I have yet to hear a single person dissent from this idea, is that when we look back at the stuff that we went through, just like videos that we all saw at the time,
Yeah.
we are shocked by how hard it is to remember how crazy it actually was. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's unintentional. I think these things are actually likely manipulated. But one of the things that may be going on that frankly could be organic is that we are suffering from a kind of shock exhaustion, where every year brings unthinkable things. And so even though COVID is, last week, it's still going on, frankly. I mean, the president is still, we just had a big, re-upping of the shots, and
there's still people masked. There's still people walking around masked outside in some parts of the United States, including where we live.
Right. So this is not over. People are still going to die from taking a shot that they shouldn't take because their government is recommending that they do, albeit much less strongly than they once did. But anyway, it's ongoing, and yet it's very hard to recover the memory of what it was as it's happening. And I think you're doing something totally unique here. You're not just going back to the tweets of the FDA or the, collections of newscasters saying insane things. You're actually picking up stories that people haven't heard, but that represent the kind of experience of being a person having your own personal life turned upside down. And anyway, hugely valuable. And anyway, I'm thrilled that somebody's doing it and that it's you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So you can share my screen now and just leave it on as we go through these. I think yesterday I published the 23rd or 24th one of these, and so there have been many. This is just an amalgam of photographs taken by Dana Ponte in Ottawa in February of 2022 during the Truckers' Convoy, which is also called the Freedom Convoy. And I published some people's stories as they experienced them then, actually, and some other people's stories during COVID, which I linked to on Natural Selections as well. But the excerpts I'm going to share now are from this year's project, in which I asked people to go back and find, original documents to verify, or, allow us to talk to, friends, neighbors, whatever, who can verify. But of course, our memory does change over time. And I think part of what has happened is akin to, forgetting the pain of childbirth. You can't live in extraordinary pain endlessly. And so you do forget it. And in this case, hopefully it's not so that we can live through it again, which is the sort of adaptive story behind not remembering the pain of childbirth. But there is an amnesia that occurs that is adaptive. And I think that adaptive amnesia is being hijacked in this case.
Yes, and I will also just say that there's a polarization here where you either cannot grapple with what happened to us because it covers so much, or you see everything through this lens because you've glimpsed this monster that did terrible things to us and was never apprehended. And
as we'll talk about, we see that in the hearing today. It's completely stark.
Right? And when we get to that, I will just say, the experience of watching that hearing, very different depending upon who you were during the COVID era itself. And I believe that hearing, as much as on the one hand, it was a nothing burger, on the other hand, it was an everything burger. Now, maybe it was an everything bagel, but remarkable for what it was, which we will get to after these stories.
All right. So from COVID Horror Stories number 17, we have Graham Stoll writing, COVID from Inside the Heart of the European Union. So many people I know of memory hold the COVID experience. I sometimes bring up details in casual conversation with friends. For example, the absurdity of getting up from a table in a crowded restaurant, putting on a face mask in order to walk to the toilet, then taking the mask off again once reseated. You remember how we all did that? I asked cheekily. Usually I am met with a studied blank stare, one which covers an awkward silence and ends the flow of conversation. I know I've uncovered something buried in their minds, and that thing stings when oxygen touches it. This, an invisible tattoo from Jean Sheffield, was the penultimate COVID era story that I've published so far from just a few weeks ago. By March 2021, she writes, we were back in our brick and mortar home. The news was everywhere about the wondrous vaccines that were then being deployed. As a trained marketer, I immediately identified and understood the recurring message around scarcity, and that upon initial release, only to our most precious citizens like healthcare workers and first responders would have access to them. Chatter was everywhere around me about reopening and getting on any waiting list possible to be first to get the vaccine. My neighbors were even interviewed on CNN about their experience in the Pfizer Phase 3 clinical trials. Too much marketing, I thought. Not enough time. No way they know that these are safe. Don't get it, my sister-in-law, who is a highly trained clinical doctor of pharmacology, said. I think that's going to be doctor of pharmacy. They've never been able to get one of those mRNA vaccines to actually work, and they're dangerous. They've killed every animal they've ever tested them on. Give me a break, my brother chortled. You think they're going to just pass this thing out to the entire planet without testing the crap out of it? Yet something about what my sister-in-law struck me as vitally true. I think we are going to wait, I thought. Months passed. Friends had parties before which everyone posted in lockstep online. We will be there and we are fully vaccinated. How strange all of this had become, I thought. But I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was so strange in the daily chaos of that era. So again, these are just excerpts from much longer stories. I encourage you to go and look at all of them.
Yeah, can't pin down exactly what it is. And it almost exists like outside of time. That's almost how it feels like during COVID.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Right. During COVID, right? COVID was a phenomenon.
Right.
And that's virus. It was a governmental orientation. It was an informational milieu. It was all sorts of things that traveled together and had everything to do with each other.
Right. And so, like, I'm calling this project COVID era stories, for lack of a better term, because it was an era. It still is an era. We're still living in it. This from Kim Kennemer, COVID era stories number 8. They won't let you in. Her father had been hospitalized, and her family was not allowed to see him. You guys remember that? Dad died of heart failure 2 days later. My dad. He'd been a newspaper man most of his life. He'd interviewed 5 U.S. presidents and a young Elvis Presley, which he said always impressed his writing students years later far more than the stories about the presidents ever did. He served as a counterintelligence agent during the Korean conflict and was stationed in France. He won a writing contest when he and my mom were just married, and the prize sent them on a free trip to Europe, where they had the time of their lives. He loved good wine and good food, rounds of golf and gin rummy. He loved people and should have been surrounded by family during his final days. He loved stories, and we should have been sharing many of them with his friends and relatives at a memorial after he was gone. But of course, during COVID, there were no public funerals or memorials. My dad's last days were spent in a morphine haze in a hospital bed devoid of love. He died alone, needlessly, senselessly, heartlessly. And his story is similar to many others, I am sure. Living in Texas, I soon learned that my COVID life was far less restricted than that of many people I know who were living in other bluer states. I think that I took that a bit for granted, but not this. This was just as cruel as any policy in the world.
I was just listening to something, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a reflection. Somebody whose family had all had COVID, and so they had natural immunity. I think all 4 of them did, and one of the parents died, and they weren't allowed to visit, even though they were the obvious people. There was no risk. They were past COVID. They weren't going to give it to anybody.
We were mocked for believing in the idea of natural immunity.
And, there's a famous little piece of video of Anthony Fauci as a young doctor, like already a government guy, but a young doctor in his early days talking. I think he literally says something like, well, we all know natural immunity is the best immunity you're ever going to get.
Right.
A vaccine tries to get to this state, but if you've had the disease, you don't need a vaccine.
The one thing that I remember thinking during COVID, when, many of us got introduced to Fauci for the first time and the Wuhan lab and like all of it, and seeing that clip from him as a young man, the one thing I was thinking was, maybe he knows or suspects that this being a human-made pathogen, it will operate differently in the body. It will trigger the immune system differently, and that natural immunity won't be as powerful.
Well, interesting you say that. It's one of the things you said on Bill Maher. And I do not know exactly why it behaved this way. Well, I guess there's a question. The shots trigger IgG4. The mRNA shots trigger IgG4, which is an anomalous thing for...
Do the adenovirus shots as well?
I do not think they do. Okay. There's no evidence for it anyway. But there's a question. Obviously, the shots were more than just spike protein. But I don't know. I guess I don't want to speculate, but it's an interesting
mRNA
question.
Shots trigger IgG4.
Which turns down the immune system. So what was
dials
that?
It down.
Dials it down, not up.
Right.
Right. A shot that dials your immunity down, not up. Dials it down with respect to the specific antigen being presented, which is obviously it's the spike protein from SARS-CoV-2. So that's a question. I think we don't have every link to show that your suspicion there is right, but it's certainly a good question.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next COVID-era story excerpt. This from a man writing under a pseudonym, Gnome Inkfeather, in a piece called Manufacture of Consent. He's an acupuncturist and also a professor of, or a clinical acupuncturist, and has been on the faculty as well. By fall 2021, I had my dream job. I was earning more than double my original salary, treating patients, training students, and supporting my family on a single income. 2 months later, the White House issued its decree. Employers with over 100 employees must mandate vaccination. The FQHC gave me an ultimatum: comply or leave. I am an identical twin. My brother works in software and had isolated himself during the pandemic. To re-enter society, and contrary to my advice, he took a Johnson & Johnson shot. It made him severely ill, and he later landed in the emergency department. All they offered him was shrugged shoulders and Benadryl. They wouldn't even log the vaccine adverse event. He recovered, but was shaken and changed, red-pilled. He filled out his own VAERS report. My identical twin had suffered a serious adverse reaction. Given this obviously relevant fact, I requested a medical exemption. It didn't matter. You still have to get it, they told me. In that moment, it became unmistakably clear that this was not about patient safety, public health, or science. It was about power. It had always been about power. I complied at the last possible moment. To minimize the risk of adverse events, I fasted and followed a mitigation protocol using ivermectin and Chinese herbal medicine. After the second Pfizer dose, I developed an uncomfortable and embarrassing lymphatic complication in a private area. Treatable, but not trivial. I managed it myself. That is my COVID story. I did not consent freely. I wrote that I was under duress on the vaccine consent form. It didn't matter. They didn't look at the form anyway. I yielded to their force, economic, professional, and institutional. My choice was not between vaccination and safety, but between obedience and unemployment, between compliance and the ability to provide for my family. This is how consent was manufactured during the pandemic, not through persuasion, but through leverage, not through science, but through power. And before you comment on this, I'll just say that I think it's coming out or already out. He's also written this, published by Children's Health Defense, Lysenko Lacks Facts, a book that's quite marvelous, and I encourage people to read it.
When something's up, when somebody is pulling a power play like this, you detect it first in the discontinuities, the anomalies that just don't make any sense, that can't be made sense of. And I remember I had a long list of them. One of them was the weird fact that we were simultaneously being shamed for not taking the shot in order to protect those who couldn't take it, and the very people who shouldn't be taking it were being told they had to.
Yes.
Right? And it's like, you just put those two things together, and, that's the moment at which you pull the brake cable and the train comes to a halt, because, something more than we're being told is going on at the point that you have such an obvious lie.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay, I think I have a couple more here. So this is This is the story that I just published yesterday. This is the most recent one. One door closes and another opens by David Finkelstein. When the mayor makes it illegal for unvaccinated people to have a job in New York City, my husband is exempt since he works for and by himself outdoors, and he remains unvaccinated. He has clients that require us to wipe every doorknob and every object we touch with a disinfectant wipe while passing through the house on the way to their backyard. Very slowly, we work through the stress which the city's vaccine mandate brings to our relationship and rebuild trust, coming back together as a couple. As we hear of more and more people we know who died from the shots or suffered serious vaccine injuries, and I share more of the scientific literature with him, his view of the vaccine shifts until it is closely aligned with my own. Enduring the official discrimination mandated by the city government together, we become closer than ever. My only sister is 2 years older than me, and we've always been close. She tells me that her husband won't let us enter their home because we're unvaccinated, even though we all had Thanksgiving dinner together in their home in 2020. She agrees to meet me occasionally in her office, properly masked, but the stress that's been created between us is toxic. Bitter arguments, long periods of silence, resentment, fear, anger. Today, my political perspective has completely transformed due to the pandemic, while hers has not. We have rebuilt our relationship, but at the price of having a large subset of topics which we cannot talk about with one another. And in this piece, Finkelstein and his husband moved to Vermont, which they find to be a haven away from the crazy of New York City. And finally, the third COVID-era story that I published, titled No Visitors Allowed by Amy Johnson. Her son has been hospitalized with COVID. This is early. This is before the shots are out, I think. So the doctor began. This is on the phone because she's not allowed in. So the doctor began. I now feel as if I have PTSD when someone begins a sentence with so. So, the doctor said. David's heart stopped again, and we weren't able to get him back this time. Everything went dark. Everything. I don't remember much from the rest of that night. The doctor told me what to do to get my son's body picked up, but it was 2 days before I even thought of that again. I just remember ending the call and collapsing into a primal grief that felt like ruination. I felt ruined. A mother whose child has been plucked away. I said, I can't do this. My COVID story is this. My son died at age 25 after losing a year of not being able to work, to socialize, to attend classes, to be normal. He died because some psychopaths and sociopaths, as Richard E. Bright at Rutgers labeled Fauci and his clan of monster makers, chose to play dangerous games of deadly pathogens and then lied about it all. David lost that year, and then he lost his life. 5 years on, I still hope for justice. I don't expect to see it in my lifetime, but I do hope it happens for David's sisters to see. It still feels impossible that this happened 5 years on.
Yeah, that's chilling.
Yeah.
Just the mere thought and what must have happened medically for a 25-year-old to die of COVID. It's extremely unlikely.
Yeah. It's extremely unlikely. And I thought I'd end the excerpts there because she calls us back to Fauci and what she calls his clan of monster makers. And we see it in this hearing today. We see this man sitting there. He gives his brief opening statement, which is empty and monstrous in its way. And then, over and over and over again, in answer to every single question he is asked, he invokes the fifth. He says, on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Some of the senators, and specifically Senator Scott, the senior senator out of Florida, does an excellent job of asking just question after question after question, which forces Fauci to say this over and over and over again. It makes him look like a fool. And it makes him look guilty. He is not a fool. But he is guilty.
He's not a fool. He is clearly guilty. This has been obvious for a very long time. And I will tell you that in watching it, I kept thinking, the difficult thing about this is that you are actually looking at a monster. To the extent that a monster is a thing, this is what one looks like. He looks like, a charming, unthreatening, well-groomed, well-spoken dweeb. I mean, that's the thing, is he looks like a nerdy scientific guy who, just found himself in a difficult position. Of course, that has nothing to do with what he is. He's actually, his bread and butter, the reason he was the most highly paid federal employee of all was that he was in charge of bioweapons research. This is a bioweapons guy.
Yeah. And Senator Ernst makes that point too in the hearing. Yep.
But I think it points to a kind of divide. Part of what is making it difficult for the public to come to consensus about what took place is that what took place is absolutely unthinkable until you make one leap, which is that there are people who, by whatever mechanism, are perfectly comfortable causing the death of innocents. And they may have a sophisticated rationalization, but the point is we know these people from history. The right thing to do with them is to allow history to record them for their ghastly crimes. And in Fauci's case, this is your chance. You can spend however long he was in front of this committee. And yes, he doesn't say anything because he keeps saying the same thing over and over again. Now, mind you, even the thing he says is monstrous because it's not obvious he has a Fifth Amendment right to decline to say anything because he has a pardon. And so, in fact, one of the rationales, not rationalization, one of the rationales that the founders had in granting the right to give a pardon was to force somebody to testify. So the fact that he has a pardon means it's not obvious at all that he has the right to refuse to answer these questions. But even if you imagine that he does have that right, he elides the part where that right derives from the fact that he is entitled not to incriminate himself, which he does not say. Right? He has the right not to testify, but he has the right not to testify so as not to incriminate himself. Right? So the point is, okay.
He's invoking the right, but not the reason for the right.
He's invoking the right, but not paying the cost, which is the implication that he did something wrong and knows it. Go ahead.
Well, because you were just there, I transcribed part of the very end when Senator Paul, who's the chairman, says, and this is not a perfect transcription, he says, I really did want to hear from Dr. Fauci today. I did want to hear an apology, some semblance of being sorry for what happened. He has been subpoenaed here to testify. He has cited a privilege that is unsupported because of his blanket pardon and because he waived the privilege by testifying at the start.
True.
I'm going to give you one more opportunity to comply with the law, Senator Paul says to Fauci. Limited to the period of your pardon at any point between January 1st, 2014, which is interesting, the pardon goes back that far, and January 19th, 2025, the moment at which Biden left office, did you destroy any federal record or tell anybody else to? Fauci, on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Paul says, given that you have an unlimited presidential pardon, what is your specific objection that you are making? Fauci says the same thing again. Paul says, my question was limited to the period of your pardon only. I find your objection unsupported and direct you to answer the question. Fauci once again says the same thing. And Senator Paul says, because you refuse to answer, citing a privilege that is unsupported because of your pardon, and after being denied to do so, this committee has scheduled a vote for next week on a resolution certifying your contempt.
Fascinating legal exchange.
Yes. Well, I guess it is an exchange, even though Fauci simply repeats the same mantra over and over again.
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but Senator Paul has specifically narrowed his question to a period in which Fauci is immune by presidential pardon. His right not to testify in a way that incriminates him evaporates as long as he couldn't be prosecuted. And so the key thing here is that a pardon, unfortunately, a pardon can be nebulous in terms of its specificity. I think that's a mistake we have to fix, because these things have become a get-out-of-jail-free card, and they've created an elevated kind of citizen that can get away with murder and everything else. But the Senator Paul is saying to Anthony Fauci, you are committing a crime today. You are refusing to answer a lawful question that this committee has a right to ask, and you do not have the right to decline to answer, and you're declining anyway. You are in contempt, right? So the point is, that's a new crime. It's one for which he does not have a pardon. And here's what's going to happen. Stuff and then nothing.
Right.
You're not, this guy is not going to end up paying the price here. He is going to be playing this elaborate game until it goes away. And one of my other thoughts in watching this, the whole set of exchanges, I mean, and the other point I want to make clearer to people who don't get it is, you're not allowed to answer certain questions that are exculpatory and not answer other questions in which you would incriminate yourself. If you invoke your right not to incriminate yourself, it has to be across the board. And so,
well, he did not answer any questions, but he did give his opening statement.
He gave a statement after being under oath.
Yes.
So
he was put under oath. He gave an opening statement, which was nothing. But then he gave that little mantra about the Fifth Amendment every other single moment that he was told he should speak.
So there is at least a valid legal question as to whether he was entitled to invoke the Fifth, not only because of his immunity, but because he had already elected to speak. He had already said prejudicial things and then declined to speak where he might incriminate himself, which, I mean, the legal ground here is fascinating. Why would he be incriminating himself if he had a pardon? Maybe because he's done something since Biden left office. Maybe because he was planning to lie to the committee, and lying to the committee would be a crime in and of itself for which he didn't have a pardon. So there's jeopardy here, even though he got an amazing blanket pardon for unspecified crimes during an incredibly long period of time, which should not have happened, right? And I do want to point out, you know, in looking into this, the idea of a blanket pardon, there's lots of precedent here of various kinds. This is egregious stuff, what happened at the end of the Biden administration. But Washington granted pardons to soldiers in the Whiskey Rebellion, I believe. Lincoln granted it to soldiers in the Confederacy so that the nation could heal. Carter granted it to draft dodgers. Ford granted it to Nixon, which is interesting for unspecified crimes. That may be the closest precedent that we have. Bush, the first Bush, granted it to Iran-Contra suspects, Casper Weinberger. So there's a lot of this stuff going on. But what's happened in the modern era is this impulse to just immunize obvious crooks at the end of an administration, so it's maximally covering. In Biden's case, we don't know. The question of whether or not the pardon might have been signed by the auto pen is actually probably not that useful. Even if it was, it doesn't matter, because a pardon doesn't apparently require a signature. I was surprised to learn that. But what it does require is the president himself authorized it. And
was he capable of authorizing anything on the last day of office?
And did he? And I will just say, in terms of what the hell we do now, I mean, I'm going to have two messages here. One message is you are getting a glimpse at the system we actually live under. And it fits well with the paradigm I laid out in a tweet thread this week, not thinking of this topic specifically at all. But you want to put up my tweet thread? I'll just read the first tweet in it. I said, something is at war with us being regular citizens who want things to work and to be left alone. We're slow to react because we think in terms of nations. Our enemies are mafias that wear governments like a cloak to defeat our eyes and fly our flags to disarm our minds. So I think the way to think about Anthony Fauci sitting there in front of this committee today is we are governed by mafias. He is a made man. I think he's just clearly a made man. And that means we don't have the ability to touch him, right? There's only so much that Rand Paul can do, or Ron Johnson. They don't have the power. They are our representatives, and we don't have the power to touch Anthony Fauci for reasons we don't know. Mafias could presumably deal with him. Mafias deal with each other and their own all the time. They have rules, but we don't know them. They're not published anywhere. We don't have standing to say, hey, this person is a flat out monster and deserves to be dealt with. So anyway, thinking of him as a made man in a mafia whose name we don't know makes a lot more sense of what you saw. What he was effectively doing was a flex. He was sitting there and saying, I don't have to answer your question because who the hell are you? Congress, what's that? Right?
The Senator Moody, the junior senator from Florida, was angry, as everyone should be. And I think there's just another quote from this morning. Excuse me. Because I think it speaks to where we actually are and where our representatives should be, and the alternate reality that Fauci and his henchmen seem to be living in. She says something like, we fought back against the lockdowns, the school closures, the church closures. We fought back. We got ridiculed for it. We didn't just call people names. We actually impaneled a grand jury, this in Florida, of people of all walks of life, of all political persuasions. So that's how I came here, fighting for a free state. We are now called the Free State of Florida. I believe that our responsibility here is to make sure the government remembers that the people are our bosses. We report to them. We are accountable to them. Government should not operate for itself. Government operates on behalf of the American people. What you're arguing is that that is a fantasy and that is not what is actually happening. And I think there are states in which it is trying to happen. I think Florida is one of them, Idaho. There are states in which the government is trying to operate on behalf of its people. But your argument that Fauci is effectively a made man in a mafia that is invisible to us suggests that that what Senator Moody is arguing is not, in fact, the world that we are living in.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem with COVID, is that for those of us who stuck it out and paid attention and tracked the various contradictions and figured out as well as we could, and I still don't think we know elements of what it was about, but I don't think we know what it was about overall.
I agree.
We don't know what the purpose of the research is that produced the disease. We know Fauci was involved. We don't know exactly what the vaccine was about and why it was important to get it into every single arm. We know Fauci was involved. We don't know why we were denied drugs that they knew full well worked. We can see that in the releases of documents this week. They knew that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin worked, and yet we were told that they didn't. Imagine you're going to turn the frickin' world upside down over a disease that is not deadly, but dangerous. And you are going to deny people comparatively safe medications that address the disease very well and force them into an untested gene therapy that you know isn't effective and is very dangerous. Like, I don't know how you get past the fact that when you do that set of things, you are actually causing deaths that would not otherwise have occurred. You're doing that. So what allows that other than a perfect comfort? It has to be done for some, I don't know, is it a business reason, a power reason? I don't know.
When you make that list, it seems to me that one thing that distinguishes the lab origin of the virus, which is the only thing on the list, which I think increasing numbers of people accept and don't find a politically unviable position, even if they're still a little shaky on whether or not it's true. That is distinct from everything else, all of the other COVID-era crimes, because for that one and that one alone, Fauci and his monster makers, as Amy Johnson in that COVID era story writes, Fauci and his monster makers have a clear interest in us not knowing the truth. It is clear to everyone why they would not want this to have originated in a lab that he and his people funded. Right? So with regard to all of the rest of them, we have hypotheses, we have some ideas, but it's still murky. Like, what is his interest? Why? What is the mafia trying to accomplish?
With its bioweapons research, which it was.
Right.
This was dual-use research.
Right. But then why keep ivermectin? Why do vaccines need to be in everyone's arms? Like, why the lockdowns? Why, like, all of these things about which we have spent hours and hours and hours talking, and we have lots of ideas, as do many other people, but the only one for which it is utterly clear that there is an incentive to obscure the truth by the people who are obscuring the truth is the virus origins.
Yep. Now, this does surface what I think is the kind of key contradiction in the hearings today. Again, it looked like a nothing burger because he didn't answer the questions. But it wasn't. He did answer a different question through his approach here. And I just think it's subtle until you see it, and then it just leaps out, which is people make the mistake because there are elements of this hearing in Congress and a court, right? Because you're sworn in under oath, because you're compelled to testify, right? Because you're cross-examined. These things evoke our reaction to a court. But the court is trying you, right? Your rights are built around trying you. This hearing is about the citizenry trying to ascertain what happened to it. Mm-hmm. This is not about you, Anthony Fauci. This is about us. We have a right to understand what happened to us. Why? So we can protect ourselves in the future, so that people who deserve justice can get it. And so even as you invoke a right you don't seem to have brazenly,
yep,
you are telling us that actually in your mind, what happened to us is nothing compared to the jeopardy to you. You don't believe in our right to be informed, right? And there's this weird connection, right? The word consent has really important legal meanings, and it comes up in three contexts. There's obviously sexual consent, which is important, and obviously people have analogized the shot to like a rape violation of the body, and I don't think that that's overdrawn. But the two things I want to point to are consent shows up in the idea of informed consent, which is the sacrosanct right that we have to reject interference with our bodies based on full evidence of what it is that's being proposed. We have the right to say no to things like your freaking shot, okay? We don't have to satisfy you that we understand it better than you do to say no. We have a right to say no, right? I frequently remind people we hanged 7 doctors for violating informed consent at the end of World War II. The other context it comes up in is the consent of the governed. Mm-hmm. Consent of the governed is the sole basis for the legitimacy of government. And so you're watching Anthony Fauci interfere with how informed we are so that we can exercise consent over our governance, right? It's like we are entitled to informed consent of the governed, and you, Anthony Fauci, are standing in the way of that because somehow to you, this is a game. And the fact that people lost loved ones who died alone and they suffer with that tragedy to this day doesn't mean anything to you. The fact that children who didn't need the shot were given the shot and died, who had long lives ahead of them, it doesn't mean anything to you. The fact that people who had immunity from having already had COVID were needlessly injected and suffered and in many cases died means nothing to you because you are a monster, right? This is what a monster looks like. Whatever you think a monster looks like, whatever it is that comes up in your mind when you see the word monster, replace it with this. This is what it actually looks like, and this is why it's dangerous. If a monster looked like a grizzly bear, people would react to them properly. But when they look like Anthony Fauci, half the country is mesmerized, right? Julia Roberts is like kissing a picture of the guy on TV.
Now? Recently?
No.
Okay, back in the day.
But the point is, okay, look,
Yeah.
you kissed a monster and you haven't owned up to it. And the fact is, actually, you should own up to it. You should come out and say, wow, was I confused? Turns out the dude's a frickin' monster. He's a killer, and he doesn't care, right? This is somebody who delights in his power even when other people are suffering and dying. And so anyway, informed consent of the governed is what we are entitled to. And Anthony Fauci is standing directly in the way of it and invoking a right cynically that he shouldn't have in this context. And all of that, if that doesn't tell you what world we're living in, I don't think anything will.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't listened to a lot of Senate hearings, but my sense, which has been said by many, is that we are in a more polarized landscape than ever before. And that was certainly, the polarization was on stark display in this. You didn't have to know who was speaking to know what team they play for, right? And okay, this is 8 Republicans, 7 Democrats, 15 sitting senators on the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. And here's just two statements made. And I won't say who said what. The attempt to vilify you, Dr. Fauci, is part of a larger campaign to vilify science. And separate human being, you call yourself the most famous scientist in the world. Well, you've done more to harm science than any other scientist in my lifetime. The first was Senator Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut. The second was Senator Hawley, Republican from Missouri. Even when I was voting Democrat, I do not remember being able to say, wow, one of these teams is just 100% always wrong.
Right.
That was not the case. How could we have gone so far afield from logic and from observation and from rigor? I mean, again, Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut, the attempt to vilify you, Dr. Fauci, is part of a larger campaign to vilify science. No, actually, the Democrats are successfully destroying the American public's ability to believe in science, to engage scientifically, to imagine that science has the answers to any problems at all. Like, this is the problem the Democrats are doing with regard to their approach to science. Follow the science. What Fauci said, I am science. Like, none of this has any relationship to science. And I mean, we said over and over and over again, like, okay, when you say something like that, Senator Blumenthal, you first of all demonstrate that you have no idea what science is. But more to the point, you're the problem. You're the one. Like, yes, we need science. We need a scientific understanding of the world. It has given us so much and will continue to do so. But what you're chasing here is the opposite. This is the inverse. This is the mirror image. This is the dark version of it's scientism, not science. And it's unfortunately not decrepit. It's incredibly powerful. It is rising. This dark form of pseudoscience is rising and is being celebrated by those who don't know any better.
The idea that this week you could make that argument, that this is, part of a larger campaign to demonize science, when one of the things that emerged this week was a fresh trove of, I think they're Slack messages amongst the proximal origins scientists who published that terrible paper in which they claimed that it was obvious that this came from the wild and couldn't possibly have come from a lab. And behind the scenes, as they talked to each other, they were having the same freaking discussion that we were having out here about the obvious signatures of lab origin.
Right.
So what you're calling science is the institutional right to dispense a narrative irrespective of what the evidence says. That's what they were doing. That's what Fauci was doing. He knew better. Christian Anderson and his buddies knew better.
Yep.
They all knew better behind the scenes. So
Yes.
it's like our last episode. Tell me in one sentence that your education completely failed you and that you know nothing, right? Because who said it during the pandemic? Somebody said it very well. Questioning the science is how you do science. That's what you do. You pressure test things. And the idea that narratives that come from some place with science in the title, that those narratives are beyond question and that those who question are either morally or mentally defective is insane. And here's the thing. It's one thing if in the midst of a trumped up emergency, you made a bad judgment. It's another thing 5 years later if you still don't get it. You couldn't possibly not get it at this point. Just look at the documents that came out this week and ask yourself, was the science the thing that they published that lied? Or was the science the thing that they talked about in their Slack messages where they were looking at the sequence and saying, this looks bad, right? This looks like it came from a laboratory. I don't see how it could have come from nature. They knew and they lied and you're still buying it. It's like, they've turned the lights on and, the magic apparatus is being, carted away and disassembled. And you still believe it's magic, right? You still accept their nonsense story, even though that that they never did. Like, how dumb would you have to be?
Yeah. The wizard has been revealed. The emperor is naked. Like we have these stories from literature and fairy tale all over the place because it is critical that we not do this. It is critical that we be able to see what we see and say what we see. And instead, we have the hijacking of words like vaccine and science and, woman separately. But, we have the hijacking of words in which they magically become something new. And people who are paying no attention go, oh, well, yeah, I've used that word before. Okay, I know I'm pro-vaccine. I'm pro-science. These are the kinds of things that I stand for. Therefore, anyone who is doing that must be the good person. And that's a move that we saw at Evergreen. Mm-hmm. Anyone who says they're standing up for the black people must be on the right side of history. Like, well, all you have to do is say it then, and you'll have your support. Like, how gameable is this?
Right.
The entire thing is so gameable. And so, no, nothing that happened today changes anything in the Senate. But we did get to see Fauci say his frickin' mantra that he was presumably told to say by counsel over and over and over again, and occasionally maybe get just a little bit uncomfortable, which, there will never be enough. And, as Amy Johnson in the end of her COVID era story that I read an excerpt from earlier asks for, we want accountability. We want to know that this cannot happen again, and that is not going to happen. But Fauci saying over and over and over again, on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Even when asked questions like, what day of the week did this thing happen on? Tells us that it's both a game to him, as you have said, and also, I think you're right. He's safe. He's a made man. We are trivial to him. We don't count, we don't rank. And also, he just knows enough about how the world is actually run that he can sit in front of senators and pretty much know that they can't touch him.
They can't. And, one of the things you get, we'll come back to the diary in a second, but one of the things that you get looking at his so-called diary, which I don't think is a diary, is that it does admit a tremendous amount of vanity.
Vanity?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Ungodly levels of vanity. And he was thinking about him during the pandemic. He wasn't thinking about you. He was playing a guy who was thinking a lot about you during the pandemic, but he was thinking about him. And he was effectively laughing at you, and he's laughing at you still. And it creates this weird, all right, quantum superpositionists get abused. Such a kind of nifty concept or trope or whatever that we can invoke in context that I'm sure make physicists squirm. But here's the thing. We live in two worlds simultaneously at the moment. I remember conversations that I had with people I cared deeply about at the beginning of COVID, right? As the lab leak story was beginning to crack. Mm-hmm. And what I saw was, actually, I think we're going to win the lab leak story. Mm-hmm. We're not yet winning the vaccine story. And we're way behind on the repurposed drug story. But we know the dimensions of it. And my feeling is we're actually way ahead in this COVID trajectory. Our side is punching way above its weight class. We need to go for broke, and we need to get all of these things hashed out so the public gets them all, because we're never going to get a better chance to see how our system works. This story diagnoses the system. In 2026, here's what we see. We actually won. Completely. All of these things are now visible to anybody who wishes to see them. And we've lost completely. Our capacity to do anything about this is now on full display. We have none. That is an amazing position to be in, but it does tell you what we have to do next, because it means that your ability to simply get the story clear enough and enough evidence on the table does not have an impact on what happens next. We're still apparently dispensing these frickin' shots. How crazy is that, right? After all that we have unearthed, after all the people who lost their careers to unearth this stuff, they're still dispensing the frickin' shots. So, okay, we won completely. Anybody who wants to know can now know pretty much what happened. We still have some loose ends. We don't know exactly what the ultimate objective was, but if you want to know what happened during COVID, you can find out. There are a lot of us out here who know. And we've lost completely in terms of power. Knowing completely what happened, or having a really good record of all of these major victories and the evidence that, was so hard won, doesn't buy you anything in terms of the ability to actually change the trajectory of the ship. So I would argue that the right thing to do is, with the part that we did win, the evidence, right? It's out there, is that we need to figure out now how to talk to the people who actually have goodness in their hearts, but are still so desperately confused. You have to figure out how to approach them with enough generosity of spirit that you can get them over the line to just seeing. You can get them to take off the blindfold. So, for example, I might approach somebody and I would say, if it was true that Anthony Fauci knew that the shots did not prevent transmission and that they waned rapidly with time, and he knew that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were likely useful ways to address this pathogen, and he told the public the opposite, knowing that the shot carried risks and that these drugs were far safer, would you then acknowledge that all of the people that you thought had lost their minds and were actually morally defective because they were being selfish and grandma was going to die, would you acknowledge that those people deserve a fresh hearing, that maybe they were right and you were so convinced that they were wrong and you had it backwards? If you can get them to admit that just that simple comparison, if it were true, would force them to rethink who they thought was good and who they thought was bad during that era, then the comparison can now be done, because we now have enough behind-the-scenes information to say that all of those things were known, and yet we got the messages that we got in public, which were dangerous, and they killed.
I want to believe you're right. It feels like a very hard sell. So in the hearing, I think it was Senator Johnson who had some numbers, because he does, that he showed with regard to doses of, and there were several things, but the three that I remember of: ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and COVID shots, given over X number of years, injuries, deaths, etc. And of course, the COVID shots. Oh, and I think remdesivir may have been on there as well.
Yeah.
Right? So remdesivir is excuse me, way more dangerous than ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine and way less effective. And the COVID shots, orders of magnitude more than any of those, right? So those numbers to me, because I appreciate, a simple table with clear numbers, just make the argument. And I understand that maybe that doesn't make the argument for many people, but it seems to me that even if you just take two of the things, say, let's go with hydroxychloroquine, which is a slightly more dangerous drug than ivermectin, right? Still like not really at all, but slightly more than ivermectin. Let's just compare known adverse events to hydroxychloroquine doses across the time that it's been used versus COVID mRNA vaccines. And then say, perhaps, to the person whom you are hoping, the good person who is still confused, say, given his position as the head of the NIAID, Fauci certainly would have had access to these numbers, right? He would have. Therefore, why were his public statements about these two things flipped? Mustn't he have been intentionally obscuring something? He could not have been this confused on both of these issues in so opposite a way. He could not have been.
Yeah, I think it's completely clear. I mean, so in some sense, the question, the mystery is, why is this man free? Why, if he knew these things, if the idea was, hey, this is an emergency and people are going to die, therefore you have to do these things, and he told you to do the things that actually cause people to die, and he didn't tell you to do the things that cause people to live, why is this man free? And the answer is because he's a made man. But the point is, I think that that's a useful exercise, because did you know that there were made men, in the NIAID? Like, that's an odd place to find a made man, but he is one. Highest paid federal employee. Did you know that? Interesting. A weapons guy. Huh. All those facts fit together. And he's going to, invoke a right he doesn't have because he was given a pardon he shouldn't have been given. I'm sorry. This is nature. This is nature's way of telling you. This is nature's way of telling you about the system that you live under. And that's terrifying, right? We live under a system we can't describe, we don't have influence over, and life and death, all the time. That's what's on the table. Life and death. We are just rolling the dice with this system that, we can't even get its attention. So I do think people made massive but honest errors in judgment. They, instead of using their minds, they used their amygdalas to reason, and they got spooked into doing shit they shouldn't, and a lot of them died, and a lot of them are still around and embarrassed. But the only way out of this is to come to agreement on the things that we actually now know, because the price for coming to understand them was very, very high. We need to recover on that investment, because this story tells us where we are like no other story.
That's right. Is that it?
I think so. Yeah.
What a world.
Yeah.
What a world we're living in. All right. We'll be back next week. Same time, same place, I think. I think next week is the same time, same place kind of deal.
Well, it's a week later.
If it's the same time and same place.
Yeah, I guess it depends. I mean,
That's the question.
Right. Same place, a week later.
I think so. Check out our sponsors this week, which were Xlear, Puori, and Marsman. Marsman is spelled with a Q, Bret points out. Xlear is spelled with an X, and Puori is spelled with a UO in the middle.
Yeah, I don't know where the Q goes. And it's interesting that they chose not to use the U. That's novel.
Yeah.
No,
Marsman has no Q in it.
No, it doesn't.
But Puori and Xlear, both are spelled somewhat unusually, but do check them out. And do like, subscribe, share what you see from us that you appreciate. And until you see us next time, be good to the ones you love, eat real food, get outside.
Be well, everyone.